Hi, this is Josh Kulp. We are learning Daf Shevui. We're on Masechet Kiddushin Daf Tet, page 9 of Tractate Kiddushin. You may notice I've shaved my beard. Alas, my Eagles did not move on to the playoffs last week, so you'll be seeing me without the beard for at least the time being. So there's a lot of topics covered in this week's daf, and I want to sort of go through them and say a couple words about each of these topics. The beginning of the daf contains a bunch of stories that really the issue here is ascertaining the woman's will, whether or not she agreed to be betrothed to the man who offered her betrothal. The stories go something like this. She sees something that she wants. He says, the man says, I'll give it to you if you're betrothed to me. And she says, give it to me, give it to me. The question is, does give it to me mean that she's agreed to her betrothal? Now, I want to point out one thing that we always have to keep in mind about this. Theoretically, a normal thing to ask would be like, afterwards, did you mean that you were agreeing to betrothal? And we could just ask her about that. But the case never really, that stuff never comes up in the Talmud, because the case is imagined as coming to the court. The court would, and she would say, look, I didn't agree to betrothal. And he would say, you did agree to betrothal. If she agrees to betrothal, the case will never come to court, because she could always just redo the betrothal. You could always just give her another something or other and say, you're betrothed to me, even if there was doubt about the initial betrothal. These kinds of cases only would really come to court if she denies that she agreed to the betrothal. So that's why we can't really ask her what she meant afterwards, because theoretically, even if 2 minutes afterwards she says, no, I wasn't agreeing to betrothal, if at that minute, when she said, give it to me, she did agree to be betrothed, then she can't just undo it by changing her mind. Okay. The second topic, finally, after all these 9 daf, discussion Kiddushin mostly with kesef, with money, we now talk about Kiddushin with a document, which is, remember, the second form of Kiddushin. Hanisha nikneit, a woman is acquired by kesef, money, shtar, and document, and bia. We'll get to that later on as well. A couple things to note about this. There is in our ketubot a line that says that the man said to the wife, Havalili into, you shall be for me a wife, which is one of the languages we've seen of Kiddushin. So there is a betrothal formula written into the ketubah today. It wasn't necessarily always so, but it has been for a very, very long time. But the ketubah document is not the Kiddushin document. Kiddushin is the means by which betrothal is effective, and the ketubah document is essentially a prenuptial agreement saying that if he divorces her or if he dies, he will give her back her property and a certain amount of his own money as well. So while both the ketubah and the Kiddushin formula could be documents, they're really not, at least the way the Talmud imagines them, the same document, although the Kiddushin formula is often written into the ketubah document. Another interesting thing to note about the Kiddushin document formula is it's always your daughter should be betrothed to me. The man says your daughter should be betrothed to me, whereas with kesef, with money, it was always you, direct to the woman. It may be that there's a certain reflection here that documents were more often used for third-party betrothals. Not necessarily your daughter, it could be one of the woman's agents, but there is some evidence that marriage was often contracted by proxy through an agent. Not often, but occasionally. Especially betrothal, if the two parties weren't anywhere near each other. That's simply how you could engage in betrothal. You could without physically being near the person, in which case oftentimes the document, for whatever reason, was used perhaps because it's just easier to prove it afterwards, whereas with money, you have a direct contact between the two parties. There's another discussion, a long discussion here about the relationship between this document, the Kiddushin document, the betrothal document, and the divorce document. After all, the divorce document is far and away the most discussed document, at least the particulars of writing it. It severs marriage, and therefore, in light of rules regarding the divorce document, we get to some rules. We get to the question, at least, do those rules apply also to the Kiddushin document? Now, finally, there is a slightly, let's say, sexual, racy, revealing, I don't know the particularly right word to use for it, discussion about Kiddushin with intercourse at the end of this daf. A couple things I want to note about it. First of all, it's very strange. The notion of Kiddushin with intercourse is very strange. Intercourse is usually the sign of marriage. And with betrothal is the couple agreeing to get married, and later on they consummate, we even use the word today, they consummate the marriage by having intercourse sometime, usually after she moves into his home. The idea that the earlier stage could be accomplished by intercourse is very strange, and I think it's largely theoretical, if not completely theoretical. But it does lead to some strange discussions when you conflate the second stage with the first stage. Now, there's also a discussion here that I think some of you may find a little bit troubling, a discussion of what constitutes intercourse. The Gemara here will talk a lot about unnatural intercourse, bia shelo kedarka, which I think most scholars interpret as anal sex. So, just be a little warned that that's coming up. If it makes you uncomfortable, well, the rabbis are really here just discussing what does it mean to have intercourse, what types of intercourse count and what types don't. And another thing I want to reiterate about some of these discussions about the death penalty, and they will sound a little harsh to our ears, but these were very theoretical. The rabbis use laws and consequences to outline the implications of actions. In other words, real intercourse has certain implications that not real, intercourse that doesn't count does not have, and they'll illustrate that by who gets what type of the death penalty. The death penalty, for instance, for a man who sleeps with a betrothed virgin is stoning, and the death penalty for a man who sleeps with a betrothed non-virgin is strangulation. You might ask, does it matter all that much? It doesn't matter all that much in a practical sense, but it does matter in defining what intercourse means and whether or not a certain person who had intercourse is considered a virgin or not. It's not an easy discussion for modern ears, but again, I would urge you to take it as a theoretical, clinical discussion. These are not real laws that rabbis or any Jews that I believe were observing, really, as far as I know, anytime. They're very, very highly theoretical. As always, I encourage you to discuss this all on our Facebook page, the Daf Shevui Facebook page. And if you have any questions there, I always try to answer or respond to comments.